welcome back to TheSadFan, where we talk about the good, the bad, and everything that made you sad. And I'm so happy to be back. So sad that I missed NFL draft week. I should have been here. I apologize. But it is time to get into all of the stuff that already happened. So we're not just talking about the stuff that made you sad from this week. We are talking about the stuff that made you sad from the last 2 weeks. And we're going to start off in the obvious place. Why weren't enough people talking about Cam Ward getting drafted? No, obviously I'm joking, but it is sad. That is a part of our first conversation. We're going to talk about Shedeur Sanders, and we're going to talk about what unearned arrogance looks like and why we need to stop taking something that is not a social issue and turning it into a social issue. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is 2 years ago on this show, when Shedeur Sanders took over as the quarterback of Colorado, I said he was good, but I said I didn't like his deep ball. There were certain things about his game I didn't like, and some of it could have been explained in not having an offensive line, not having an amazing offensive coordinator, not having a game plan that suited him. But then time continued, and not only was he not the best athlete on the field, because that was Travis Hunter. Every game they went into, it was Travis Hunter. Oh, there's another player. We don't get to talk about another thing that happened in what was one of the weakest drafts we've had in years and years. And I've been talking about that leading up to the draft, that this is one of the weakest drafts I have seen in a very long time, if not the weakest draft in a very long time. But only time can tell that. Like, we have to wait to see what's going to happen with some of these players and if they're going to be something. Right now, we don't really see a standout. Like Ty Warren maybe at tight end, but we had Brock Bowers with Las Vegas last year. And I don't see that Ty Warren's going to be able to do what Brock Bowers was able to do, especially on the Colts, because the Colts have a quarterback issue. And they also didn't draft Shedeur Sanders, right? They are going to continue to put all of their eggs in the Anthony Richardson basket, which is another player that I said was not going to be a great quarterback. It's another wasted first-round pick, okay? And I think a lot of teams were catching on to that. Now let's talk about Shedeur Sanders' attitude before we get too far away from that. We started to see things in Shedeur that were just really obnoxious. Seriously, watch some of the videos of Shedeur Sanders talking to other players after the game. Watch the videos of how he is reacting to the Arizona State crowd years ago with the Rolly and things like that. A lot of the stuff he has is because of who his dad is. And that's it. And he doesn't even have half his dad's talent. Okay, his dad was an absolute superstar, can't miss a prospect, whereas Shedeur Sanders, obviously, was not that. So a lot of people, again, stopped after the first season and said, you know what? If he had left in the first season, he'd be a first-round draft pick. If he had left in the second, I don't agree. I don't think he would have been a first-round draft pick. I think there's a lot of flaws in his game that were covered up by the media. Now, the flaws in his game that were not covered up by the media is he's kind of an asshole. No, there's no kind of about it. Shedeur Sanders is, in fact, an asshole. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you can't say that he's not dedicated. Of course you can. Of course you can. The only thing you can say is he's got great genes. That's the only thing you can say for sure is he's got great genes. Everything off the field was a problem, to include what was reported from some of his interviews, that he was going into some of his interviews with some of these head coaches and GMs with headphones in, that he was trying to tell some of these leaders of teams how he was going to play and what offense he was going to run. And nobody wants to deal with that. Now, his talent, again, isn't the same as his father's talent. It's not even close to what his father had, because if he had that talent, they would put up with the asshole. What you saw a lot of teams do in this draft was decide, hey, we have a choice here. The choice is we could either put up with an asshole or we don't have to put up with the asshole. And they chose to not put up with the asshole. And if you look at the Browns' war room when they made that pick, that was definitely a house divided. You could absolutely tell that no one in that war room wanted to make that pick, and you cannot blame them, because I've said this in running companies and being a manager of companies, you only need one bad seed to spoil an entire team. And he is that bad seed that can spoil an entire team. If you read some of the stories that came out of that locker room, the locker room in Colorado that was published in an article where Deion Sanders banned the reporter from Colorado press conferences. That's how they react to these things. Any type of criticism, this is like the current playbook of anyone that's not a great person, is if you disagree with me, then you're the problem. You're a terrible person. Less and less people want the truth. They just want to be right. And it's pretty pathetic at this point in time. And that was Shedeur Sanders. He didn't want the truth, but he was in a profession. He is in a profession where he got the truth. And he got the truth pretty quickly, which was, hey, you don't have enough talent to act the way you do. In fact, all this NIL stuff you got because of your father. You weren't even that good at Colorado. And that is shown by his play on the field. I said in my last show that he got fat on bad teams, and that's true. But he also got fat with really, really good receivers, with Horn and Hunter. They're both very good wide receivers. Hunter is so good that he probably should have been the number 1 overall pick if it wasn't the Titans' pick. Okay? The only reason that the Titans didn't take Hunter is because they needed a quarterback in Cam Ward, who is a great quarterback who showed improvement and humility every step of the way. And I'm not saying you have to show humility. I'm somebody that I really support these players that are telling you how good they are and they go out and show it. The problem is Shedeur Sanders never went out and showed it. There was never any proof that he was as good as he was saying he was. And you could say that, I'm going to go all the way back to 2 weeks ago, that he took a bad Colorado team and turned it around, but he didn't. They just played worse teams. And also, they had better players. That's one thing I will say. They had better players brought in by Deion Sanders, not by Shedeur Sanders. And no, they were not lured there to play with Shedeur. They were lured there to play with Deion Sanders. This is a lot about nothing. Okay? Scout saw what Scout saw. It wasn't about keeping Deion's son out of the NFL. It wasn't about not wanting to deal with Deion. It was about not wanting to deal with an asshole. And even this didn't humble him. So he's still out here acting kind of like an asshole. And in all of these situations, I will always say, I am hoping that I am wrong. I am hoping that Shedeur Sanders can go out there and be great for the Browns. And he has an opportunity. He has an opportunity to beat out the quarterback that they actually wanted in Dillon Gabriel, who went in the 3rd round. But will he? That remains to be seen, because there's no rule that says Kevin Stefanski has to play him. I'm sure it will happen, because obviously this pick was made by Jimmy Haslam, who has made a slew of bad picks in the past, right? Remember the Johnny Manziel stuff? So he isn't great at picking players. Kevin Stefanski has not had a great run in Cleveland. They got rid of Baker Mayfield, who went on to have a couple rough years, but it appears he was injured throughout those rough years, and then have a phenomenal year, 2 years now, in Tampa. So if this keeps up, the Browns will continue to look like a laughingstock, because right now they have an insane quarterback room that includes Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Deshaun womanizing Watson. It has Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, and there's no way to know who's actually going to start or if any of them should start. That's the crazy thing. Should any of these quarterbacks be rostered as anything more than a 3rd-string quarterback? I don't know. But what I will tell you is I do know that Shedeur Sanders was not a first-round talent, because this was a very weak draft. It wasn't just a weak quarterback draft. It was a weak draft all around. And if he can't make it past the 5th round, it has nothing to do with anything other than he lacks talent. What you saw, or what you thought, was a facade portrayed by sports media, and a lot of it was pandering to that Colorado team, because that Colorado team got ratings and you needed to be there. And you saw, if you weren't pandering to that Colorado team, Deion Sanders didn't want you, didn't need you, and you were not going to be a part of that media room. So what do you do to fix that? You continue to propagate that his son is great. You continue to say, Shedeur Sanders should be a top 5 pick. Shedeur Sanders should be the 2nd quarterback off the board, until he's not. Okay? And yeah, Mel Kiper, I think you bought into the hype. I don't think that you should have been up on ESPN saying what a travesty is and that people don't get it, because you've gotten a lot of stuff wrong too. All right? Jamarcus Russell is one of the worst picks to ever happen, and you had him so high on your draft board. So get out of here with you're always right, with you always know what you're talking about, because you don't, because no one does. But what I will say is a lot of people don't think that this guy was a 1st-round quarterback, and then they displayed it. Okay? He had to go all the way to the 5th round. And one thing we know about NFL teams is if a player can help them win, no matter what, okay, Mr. Deshaun Watson, they're going to sign him. No matter what a terrible person they might be, no matter what terrible things they have done, they're going to sign him. It doesn't matter about the arrogance. It doesn't matter about what they did in the team meetings. It matters about what they can do on the field to a lot of these owners, GMs, and teams and coaches. And this guy couldn't do it. He couldn't hack it. He couldn't even run an offense that wasn't the one he wanted to run, as displayed by the way he was talking to some of these teams in the meeting. So what makes them think he's going to be a good quarterback? He's not as fast as his father. He's not as fast as other quarterbacks that are fleet of foot in the NFL. He's not a great thrower of the football, doesn't have a ton of arm strength, doesn't have great decision-making skills, as a lot of times he just put the ball up and hoped that Travis Hunter was somewhere down the field. So do you really blame them, or are you starting to see that this is a bunch of silliness that everybody's hollering about incorrectly, and they would just want to be heard and seen as some person that's like, look at how great I am, look at the message I'm sending, when the message is he just wasn't good enough. And we need to accept that Shedeur Sanders just wasn't good enough. Okay? That's it. He beat bad teams. He never beat a good team. And here we are, arguing about a player that's not good enough to make it to the playoffs in college football, not big enough to win the Big 12, and he's not good enough to be a first, second, third, or fourth round draft pick. And that's it. That's the story on Shedeur Sanders. On to win now. The Warriors need to win the game tonight. And the Knicks realized that they needed to win the game that they won a couple days ago because, one, the Knicks are beat up and injured and they need some rest. The Warriors should have realized that too, as they went from 3-1 to 3-3 in this series. And they're playing a Houston Rockets team that is inexperienced, not great offensively, and young outside of their inexperience. And they haven't put them away. They had a great win, a great morale boost win in the game to put them up 3-1. And they didn't follow that up with that momentum that comes from a win like that. Instead, they've fallen off and dropped 2 games, one at home. And that's just something that can't happen. All right. The Knicks got the memo. Tom Thibodeau got the memo, and they went out there and they beat the Detroit Pistons. They didn't allow what was or could have been a passion response from the Detroit Pistons. They showed that Cade Cunningham needs some support from a surrounding cast that can play with Cade Cunningham. They showed that, hey, right now, the New York Knicks can at least make it to the second round of the playoffs, get a little healthy, and not have to go through 7 games to do it. However, the Warriors didn't do this, and they've got injured Steph Curry, an old Jimmy Butler that was injured prior, and an old Draymond Green. And that's what they're going into these series with. That's what they're going into this game with. So now we've got a Game 7 in Houston, a game that shouldn't be happening, that the Warriors absolutely have to win. And not only do they have to win it, but they're going in to play a very hungry Timberwolves team should they win. And this Timberwolves team has the self-proclaimed Kingslayer in Anthony Edwards. And I really miss having my co-host here when we talk about this stuff, because Anthony Edwards is ready to put himself as the face of the league. He is absolutely ready to be the player that the NBA looks at and goes, hey, this is the face of our league, and I don't care what you think about it. That's who Anthony Edwards wants to be. He wants to be Charles Barkley on the cover of the magazine that says, I am not your child's role model. And he hasn't been. In fact, all that Anthony Edwards has shown is that he wants all of the smoke. And on his wall, the heads that are on his wall is a murderer's row of all-stars, superstars, and surefire Hall of Famers, as he's beaten people like Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Luka Doncic in his playoff runs. But he hasn't taken that next step to get to the championship. And this year probably won't be the year, because SGA and Chet Holmgren will have something to say about it if he plays OKC, as OKC viciously dispatched their competition in the Memphis Grizzlies, and a player that I love, in Ja Morant. But back to the Warriors, as they try to figure out how to get out of this hole and then continue to play, because they are going to go from this game into a buzzsaw in Minnesota. And Minnesota is hot right now, and they know it, and they've got size again on another team that they're going to play in the second round if it is in fact the Warriors. What's crazy about this situation is it shouldn't be a situation that the Warriors find themselves in, but they are. And can Steve Kerr prove to the world what he proved in 2022, that he is, in fact, one of the best coaches in the NBA, that he knows how to manage this team of veterans to another championship, or at least to a playoff series win? So I said this before the play-in games started. They should have never been there, but they lost to bad teams like the Miami Heat. They lost an important game that went into overtime against the Los Angeles Clippers. And here they are now, on old legs, on tired legs, in a game 7 in round 1 that they shouldn't be in, but they are. And can Steve Kerr take Steph Curry and everything that he brings, take Jimmy Butler, who they traded for, and then signed to $50 million a year for the next 2 years, and take Draymond Green to the next round? But that game is tonight, and we're going to go ahead and ride with the veterans. We're hoping that this is where we see the youth of the Houston Rockets. And I know they have Fred Van Fleet, who is a champion. That shouldn't be enough. That should not be enough. You should not be losing to a Fred Van Vliet. Collectively, I think the whole NBA world, after the Lakers were eliminated, wants Steph Curry, the Warriors, to make it to the next round. They want to see Steph Curry take on the Timberwolves. They want to see if Anthony Edwards can do it again, can take on another superstar, another champion, and beat them. And if he does, will that cement his legacy? The answer is no, because he still doesn't have any championship. But it'll take it very, very far as the mythology surrounding Anthony Edwards is concerned. Our last topic of the day is parents in sports, and we've been dealing with this forever, right? Since Pee Wee, since T-ball. And should they be there? Should they be that loud? Everyone's kid in their own mind is the next Michael Jordan. And in the case of Tyrese Halliburton, his son made it all the way to the NBA. He made it all the way to the NBA, and then he beat one of the best players in the whole world. In fact, another champion in Giannis Antetokounmpo. But instead of staying in his seat, he got up, ran to Giannis Antetokounmpo's face, and started cursing at Giannis Antetokounmpo in front of thousands of fans, the television cameras, looking like a fool, looking like that parent that we all remember from T-ball, from Little League Baseball, from Little League Football, from, AAU. And the parent that we've all seen that is overzealous, that doesn't know how to shut up, and that should be, let's not promote violence on the TheSadFan, but no one would have been shocked or surprised if Giannis Antetokounmpo had taken action, and no one was thinking about what could have happened. The failure here is also on the security team, right? The security team should have stopped Tyrese Halliburton's dad, but they didn't. And instead, we have these images, we have these words, these sounds from this game that we're not going to be able to unsee or unhear ever. Like, this will follow Tyrese Halliburton forever. That is my prediction as far as this story is concerned. And it's sad because you'd think at some point in time, parents would grow the bleep up, and they don't. And we saw that with Tyrese Halliburton's dad. And it was honestly pathetic. And it's crazy that he was able to create a great player and who portrays himself and appears to be a pretty good person in Tyrese Halliburton, because that was a sad sack move that was totally Bush League to run up to a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is giant, 6'10", built like a brick house, and could kill you if he wanted to, and put him in that situation after a game that he lost that could be his final game playing for the Milwaukee Bucks. And you feel like it's okay to do that. Well, the thing that you would do when your kid is 10 years old, you're going to do it as a grown-up. It's pathetic. And it should have never happened. And the NBA, it looks like he's apologized and he's not going to any more games, but it should have never happened. And the NBA needs to look into the way security operates, because that is a dangerous situation, not just for the players, but for the fans. Because again, if Giannis Antetokounmpo reacts in any way, which we're going to talk here in a second about the words he had, reacts in any way negatively in that moment, imagine the scandal that's on your hands. And it's your fault for not stopping someone as pathetic as Tyrese Halliburton's dad from making it that far onto the court and saying those things to one of the great superstars in the NBA today. Now let's really quickly talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo's response to this situation, which can only be described as one of the most humble responses you will ever hear. I encourage all of you to go look up Giannis Antetokounmpo, talk about how he was raised and how he looked up to his father and how he learned humility from his father, and why what Tyrese Halliburton's father did was so disrespectful and how he should be thinking about what kind of example he's setting, not just for the people watching the game, but for everyone that is at these levels of youth sports, out there for their children, out there to try to support what could be a lifelong obsession with an amazing sport in basketball or any sport. If you are the parent of someone that is playing baseball, t-ball, little league, soccer, football, European football, if you didn't like that, I could just call it soccer, hockey. Watch what Giannis Antetokounmpo said in his response to what happened with Tyrese Halliburton's father, and grow up. Grow up. Not everything requires you to respond in a way that is hostile towards another human being. Not everything requires you to try to start a fight with another human being, especially one that could easily take you out if you wanted to, in Giannis Antetokounmpo. And grow up, parents. Enough is enough. Don't go out there and embarrass your kid or embarrass yourself or embarrass your family by trying to pick a fight with everyone around because you think your kid is the next Michael Jordan, or because your kid just did something phenomenal and you need to say something. Say that you're an adult. Go out there and make sure that you show respect to the people that are in this arena, that are competing in these sports, and you're not trying to pick a fight with everyone that you see. So shame on Tyrese Halliburton's father. We thank you for tuning in each and every week to the Sad Fan, and we'll see you next week.
Back to the block, I'm scamming. Back in the shop, I'm scamming. Get it off a dummy, I'm scamming.